For the last few years of RC racing, I've been running stock classes, controlled motors, ESCs, and sometimes even controlled tires like at Masters of Dirt. My last stock race was the finals of Snap Hard about a month ago, and since then I've had a mod motor in my 2-wheel drive buggy. Even before then, I got some experience running mod at another race not too long ago. Unfortunately, I forgot my camera equipment that day, so I can't really show you that footage, but it went something like this. With that being said, why would I want to switch to mod after running stock for so long? That's what I want to go over in this video. Not only why I'm switching, but also the differences between stock and mod. Before we begin, however, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and be sure to hit that bell icon to know when I upload. Without further delay, let's begin. Let's begin with the aspects of stock racing. Stock racing can mean a lot of things depending on where you live and where you race. I'm also aware that stock racing is pretty much non-existent in places like Europe or Oceania, but bear with me. Stock racing basically means controlled motors or controlled power plants. To put it simply, everyone has the same turn motor and everyone runs blinky mode, so at least power-wise, everyone is on the same level. As for the turn rating each class uses, it depends on how much the car actually needs. For example, a touring car might not need as much power as say a 4-wheel drive off-road buggy. Therefore, independent touring cars tend to run 21.5 turn motors, and for those with a little bit more skill or sponsors, but still want that level playing field, you usually be running a 17.5 turn motor. This is the same case with 2-wheel drive buggy as well, as the independent or beginner level drivers will sometimes run 21.5 turn motors, and sponsored or intermediate to expert drivers will run 17.5 turn motors. 4-wheel drive buggies tend to run all kinds of motors depending on where you live, from 17.5 all the way to 10.5, and this is the case with stadium trucks and short course trucks as well. Now, a lot of people tend to think that running stock is a cheaper way to get into RC racing, and that's partially true. What do I mean by this? Well, buying the required electronics needed to run stock is usually a lot less expensive compared to mod. A stock spec ESC from Hobbywing or Reedy costs right around $50 to $60, whereas a mod ESC from any of the big ESC brands can cost well above $150. The motors tend to be roughly the same price, but my point still stands. The initial costs of stock tend to be less than mod. And initially, that was the point of stock racing. Not only to put everyone on a level playing field, but also to minimize the cost needed to get into racing to begin with. However, where there are racing, there are people who are willing to do anything in order to get an edge. This is where the majority of costs come from when it comes to stock racing: the upgrades and hop-ups. I'm personally guilty of this as well. Hell, I made 2 whole videos about upgrades, but at the end of it, I noted that the number one thing that will make you faster on the track is track time itself. Unfortunately, not everyone goes off of that motto, which is part of the reason why there are so many different hop-up parts you can buy for your racing rig these days, from ceramic bearings all the way to completely different chassis. Suddenly, the cost of stock racing can go up very quickly, and I haven't even gotten to the situation of large controlled races. When I went to Masters of Dirt in 2021, I had no idea how much I would actually have to spend. I had already spent a lot on travel expenses and race entry fees, so when I got hit by the bill for the controlled tires I would have to use, suddenly I was envious of those able to run whatever tires they desired. Now, controlled tires are not very common when it comes to, say, club racing, but at places like Masters or the Roar Nationals, it is quite common. As is having to bring your motor, tires, and batteries to be inspected before running a race. After a while, it becomes tiresome. Still, at least you'll be running with people who are roughly your skill level, unless they're sandbagging, in which case that's a whole nother thing altogether. Even though stock racing was meant to be sort of an all-inclusive class that was meant to be cheap, it's sort of molded into something different altogether. And that leads us into mod. Mod, on the other hand, is pretty much a byword for an open class. Of course, there are certain rules there to keep things from going too weird, like running a 550 size motor in a 2-wheel drive buggy, but everything else within reason is allowed. You're free to spend as much money on electronics as you wish now for the most part, and you're pretty much able to throw power whatever problem you may have. If you need just a little more punch, you can turn up the boost timing on your ESC. You don't need to spend $80 on a new ceramic bearing kit. Not only that, but like Masters of Dirt, you don't need to worry about running a specific tire as it's unrestricted. What you will end up spending money on will be the electronics themselves, as they are sometimes insanely expensive like mentioned before. Of course, there are still some rules you will have to adhere to, like the minimum weight requirement of 1,474 grams and using Roar-approved motors and ESCs for those kinds of races. Other than that, it would seem like running mod would be much cheaper endeavor, and you'd be right in the long haul. But don't think I'd fully recommend it full stop, as mod still has some downsides. The first thing I want to highlight is setup. Mod cars require a much deeper understanding from how setup works as a whole. That's because you're putting more stress on the car. You're forcing more power through the driveline and onto the ground, and you're carrying more speed into the corners. Because of this, a setup that might work for stock might not work for mod, and vice versa. This is especially the case on dirt tracks where traction is already limited for the most part. Rear toe-in is going to be your best friend. One extra thing to note about running mod is that you'll be running with the best of the best most of the time, especially at large events like Masters. So if you're just starting out, it wouldn't make much sense to run mod for that reason alone, but there's more. Like I mentioned before, the car is under a lot more stress than it is, and so it's more on edge more of the time. Because of this, mod cars are usually much more difficult to drive than stock cars, as having more power usually means less room for error. This can be both good and bad for someone starting out, as it can be very frustrating to continuously crash over and over again, and since you're usually crashing at a higher speed than if you would be in stock, the chances of breaking something is higher. However, if you're able to overcome that frustration and are patient, you can get much better, much quicker than if you were to only run stock, especially if you were to run a two-wheel drive class. Think of it like being tossed into a river when you don't know how to swim. You either learn quickly, or you'll drown. The number one reason I'm switching is simple. I want to improve as a driver. After winning two-wheel drive stock at Snap Hard somehow, I realized that in order for me to improve, I need to race people faster than me. That's kind of true with a lot of things you may want to improve at. If you want to get better at a game, you play against people at or above your skill level. You may lose a lot, but eventually you will adapt and get better. The same applies to racing, so long as you have the right mindset. If you blame everything but yourself and never look to see what you did wrong, you'll never improve. However, if you take a step back and analyze what you did wrong, you can go very far in this hobby. Another reason I'm switching is because when it comes to larger races, I have no desire to go through tech inspections again. Nor am I really trying to spend a dummy amount of money on tires again. Nor am I willing to take that extra step with a lot of things that many stock racers do. Replacing every screw in the car with titanium ones, replacing every turnbuckle with Lunsford turnbuckles, replacing all the bearings, okay maybe I did do that, and avoiding the warranty in all of your batteries. All of these things are things stock racers do to stay competitive, and I simply don't want to do any of that anymore. And that's all for now. If you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate you. If you liked the video, remember to hit that like button and subscribe as well. Also, be sure to hit that bell icon if you want to know the moment I upload a new video. Also, if you want to support me another way, you can subscribe to my Patreon where I post updates on all my videos' progress and ideas. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank my patrons Michael Williams, Lucas Tarka, RC World Discord server, Ben Reeves, Casey Nix, Dave Armstrong, and Ryan Lamb. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.